So as someone who is guilty of having the bag of bags, if you are going to keep bags, is the amount of bags that you should have in the bag of bags.
By the way, it doesn't sit in my house. It stays in my trunk because we drive it. That said, you can get to that number by seeing what's the biggest load that I need to carry out of Costco any given week. Make that your maximum. And I promise you, if you go into Costco and you're missing a bag, like you will find a bag somewhere. It is not, bags are not scarce.
We are back for another episode of Crush Your Money Goals, and I am super excited for this topic because it's something near and dear to my heart, which is really how do you live your best life and organize yourself in a way that you don't feel stressed and cluttered and feel like total crap about where you live. And so I would like to introduce you to my new friend. And we met at a podcast conference. And I didn't know that we could have a podcast on such a topic. And so it was so exciting for me to meet her and to introduce all of you to her on her big tips. And she is a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you. So I'm Zeenat Siman. And yes, I'm a professional organizer. And what's so funny about the day that we met at the podcast conference is that I sat in on your session thinking of finances and understanding. And I was very excited about your book. And so I'm sitting in there and then you start talking about, we need to declutter our finances. And I thought, wait a minute, this is exactly what people need to hear. So I was super excited to sit through the session, to read your book. It was amazing. And to find the parallels between what you do and what I do. So thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you so much. And I love that you heard those parallels. I've gone through phases of being like super obsessed with this topic, and so it was a nice, I'll say, cyclical thing for me to meet you in this stage of my life, because I just told you right before we got on this conversation that I just moved and I actually downsized from a 2-bedroom now down to a 1-bedroom with the hopes of being really to fully move abroad. And so I was like, oh my gosh, perfect timing to talk to you and get some tips for others if you're in a transition in your life and you're realizing the stuff is getting in the way of that transition. Since many people are meeting you for the first time here, can you tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do and how you do it?
Yeah, so when you hear the word professional organizer, you think of somebody coming into your house and helping you declutter, make your pantry look pretty and things are matching. And yes, that's a large part of what I do. My ultimate goal is to find that sweet spot for people where they're living with what they need, where their stuff isn't burdening them. By decluttering their stuff, it helps open up more possibilities for them because you have less things happening in your mind when your environment is in order. And so that's my goal with people.
We are so aligned on that for sure. And similarly, when you declutter your finances, there's so much more that your mind can be able to process and create and heal from. And so we are going to walk through the 5 steps of Crush and talk about how organizing really can help you crush your money goals, but also design the life that you want. So the first letter in Crush stands for curate your accounts. So C equals curate your accounts. And one of the things that I have noticed about my clients is that just as how they might be cluttered in their finances, it tends to show a parallel in their homes. And so I'd love to get some insight from you on how we can be better curators within our homes versus what I call collectors.
A lot of people feel that one side of their lives is very much in order. So for example, I was an engineer, and so I was very meticulous at work. Everything was in order at work. At home, that wasn't the case. And so I felt like my home didn't really reflect who I wanted to be and how I wanted to live my life. And a lot of it was because of what you just said. I was collecting things. So what we tend to do is we tend to accumulate in the early part of our careers as we live our lives. We buy homes, we have children, and that kind of thing. And where we need to start understanding that this is becoming an issue is when the things that we own are no longer always serving us. So you might have the collection of dishes, beautiful platters that you pull out once a year. Are those serving you? Well, absolutely. If you're going to use them once a year and you love using them, you love taking them out and seeing them and putting them away. Where it becomes an issue is when you have 30 coffee mugs and you only use 3? Do you really need the other? And you can start small. It's not to say that you need to look at your entire home or you've been living there for 10 years and think, oh my gosh, now I've got to get rid of a bunch of my stuff. Start with the coffee mugs and really think about, what do I want to keep? Not how many things can I get rid of to make space, but what do I want to keep and why am I wanting to keep it? And the way that I make it easier to focus on that is to limit. So I, just like you use the acronym CRUSH, I use the acronym CLEAR: clarify, limit, edit, assign, and review when we are decluttering and organizing. And that limit, the L for limit, is very simply the space you are going to allow. You are going to allow for a certain item. So for my coffee mugs, it's this little section of this cabinet. And when my coffee mugs go beyond that, I have to make a decision. Am I going to take up space from something else to keep this extra coffee mug, or am I okay with getting rid of that coffee mug? You can start making very simple decisions about what you're choosing to keep versus accumulating and collecting.
I love that. That actually leads me naturally into the R in CRUSH, which is reversing into independence. And I felt this personally as we were going through this move right now, where my husband and I have been thinking about moving abroad for the last year or so. And then it just felt like a really big leap, specifically because of the stuff. And when I say that in the sense of just, what are we going to do with our couch? And what are we going to do with our dining room table? And what are we going to do with all these clothes? I actually pride myself as a minimalist to a certain degree. I've been able to downsize from like a 4-bedroom to a 2-bedroom. And so I didn't think that going from a 2-bedroom to 1-bedroom would be really difficult. But I found it to be, in some cases, harder than that first big downsizing, because I thought that I had moved on from that, like holding on to stuff because it's still good, it's still useful. And I realized that I didn't. And so when I ask you about the reversing into independence, how do you start freeing that mindset of holding on to stuff just because it's still good and useful, even if you're not using it anymore? And maybe if you have an example of a client or a personal example of where you were able to, like you said, limit and let go, that created more freedom for you.
This morning I was speaking to someone, his name is Andre, and he was telling me that in his home, they're looking to purchase a new home. And the spaces, the homes that they've seen and the homes that they've bid on so far, all have much less storage space than their current home. And he is a collector of books. He loves having books everywhere. His office is filled with books, but now his home is also filled with books. And it became very clear this morning that in order for his family to be able to move into a new home, something has to give. And the biggest culprit of taking up space is his collection of over 700 books. And so we started to talk about what's important about it. Why are you keeping these books? What prevents you from saying, hey, these books are available at the library, online, and in ways that you don't have to collect and keep? The mindset that we fall into, the first thing that happens is our stuff tends to expand into the space that we have. And it's only when all of a sudden we are faced with, I don't have that much space anymore, does the stress of, oh my gosh, now I've got to get rid of all the stuff that I love, and I don't know if I can do it. And it's a real stress. It really hurts when we have to realize that this represents money that I've spent and I don't want to get rid of it. I've spent money on this. It represents money. But, and you've said this before, what we have in our homes, yeah, it was money, but it is no longer money. That money's gone. You've spent it on this item. Now the idea is, how do you move forward? So if Andre's goal is to move into a new house, the idea is, let's take some time to think about, yes, I've spent money and I've spent time on all of these books, but is this really where what I want to shove into my new home? Is my home going to feel the way that I want it to feel if my entire home is lined with books and my kids don't have a real space to play? So it's things like that. Those are the questions that I ask people when we start to talk about, okay, let's think about what you want to keep and what is okay to let go of. It's a process, and it might take some people much longer than other people to decide. But I love that you were thinking that you guys are going to move abroad. Isn't that the greatest kick in the pants ever to think about, oh my gosh, I need to be able to move around in 2 suitcases, and how can I do that? And that's the most freeing thing ever. For me, that's how I want my house to be. And I get it. I would love to be able to say, I want to spend 6 months in Alaska next year, and all I want to bring with me is the important stuff, 2 suitcases, and not have to worry about anything else. And so that to me is like the ultimate independence. Everyone has a different idea of what their independence is, but that's how we have to start thinking about it. What's important, and letting go of the idea that I've spent money on this and it's worth something. That's not going to help you. That's not going to help you choose what belongs in your life.
Yeah, it pains me. I think that the worst pain I have when I'm letting go of stuff is like, in particular, are clothes or shoes that I've only worn like once or twice, and it was like expensive, but like it doesn't look good or it doesn't feel comfortable. Like I have this pair of heels that I keep carrying around with me, even though every time I wear them, I wanted to cry. I want to die. And so I still have some work to do on that. Oh, I'm like feeling very motivated today.
And one of the greatest things is to say, okay, who could use this? Who could I gift this to? Or what organization can I gift it to? There are all those organizations that are providing kids with outfits for prom or outfits to have interviews in. You can help others, even though it is painful to get rid of these things. You have a way to help others, and that might help ease the pain a little bit.
Yeah. So speaking of like worth and like thinking about how objects are worth a certain thing, the U in Crash stands for understanding your worth, and net is in parentheses because the conversation around net worth and self-worth is often intertwined. And I'm so curious, have you come across people whose sense of self-worth is very much tied to these like material goods, and like how do you separate that?
So I worked with Dan, a client, a couple of years ago, and I remember very clearly he said, I have these bins and boxes of notebooks, textbooks, research papers that I worked on from my college days at an Ivy League university. And I'm keeping these, and I'm hoping maybe my kids want to see them. They don't fit in my house. And I had to tell him, okay, your diploma, that physical diploma, even without it, you are still a graduate of that school. That is still your legacy that you can pass on to your kids. All of the research that you did, all of the knowledge that you have, you can still pass that on to your kids without hanging on to the textbook, which is by now likely obsolete after 30 years.
Yeah.
So we start there, that the physical thing is not you. Even without the physical thing, you still have that identity. And that is really where we have to begin with some of the things that are really sentimental like that.
This is so interesting. I had a company called Dressed where I would rent out dresses for women for special occasions. And like part of my love of decluttering was taking these dresses from other women's closets and being like, let me borrow these, let me rent them out to other people, and then you can have it back whenever you want them. And there was this woman one time, I'll never forget it, and she had like orthopedic surgery, and she had a massive shoe collection, like hundreds and hundreds of shoes. And so somehow, like, one of my clients reached out to me. She said, I have this client who has like hundreds and hundreds of these shoes, and she literally cannot wear them anymore. They just they don't fit her feet anymore. And can you help me help her get rid of them? And if I was like doing the math, if each of these shoes are like $200 because they were like expensive shoes, this is like thousands and thousands of dollars of shoes. I could like physically feel the pain that she had as I was like carrying these boxes out of her house, not only from the perspective of that was money spent, but also there was this like chapter of her life that was closed, that she can't wear high heels anymore.
Yes.
Just because you can't wear high heels doesn't mean you're not sexy. Like just because you don't have research papers doesn't mean that you're not smart. So I love that example, and that leads me into the S in Crush, which is to spend intentionally. Oftentimes we always talk about saving money, but I'm curious if you think there's anything worth splurging on, like to spend intentionally in order to keep a really like organized and like peaceful home.
Listen, I call myself a lazy organizer. Like I will do everything in my power to not have to keep organizing my house all the time. It's my job and I love to help other people do it. But good Lord, I want to be done. I don't want to be every day have something else to organize. My feeling is splurge on what makes you excited, on what makes you happy. Okay, high-heeled shoes, really expensive high-heeled shoes that make you feel fantastic. Do you want to splurge on those? Sure, you can. It's a choice that you're making, but you're making it very intentionally. I'm splurging on these shoes. I know how much money I'm spending on these, and I know how much space they're taking in the things that are in your house, they are paying for rent. So when I'm thinking about buying something, I think about, is this guy going to pay his worth in rent in the end? Am I going to use these shoes enough, or do they make me feel amazing enough that I want to keep that guy in my house for a long time or a short amount of time? It's up to you. But it's a very intentional decision that you have to make. And your house is a certain square footage. Whether you're paying rent or whether you're paying mortgage, you're paying for that space. So fill it wisely. Fill it with stuff that you love. Just be very clear that you are spending that amount of money, that depth of money on that light fixture, and make sure that it's paying its worth in rent.
I love that. Now I'm so curious if you want to spill the tea on this. Are there common trends of things that you see people like consistently regret spending money on?
Regret, oh my gosh. It's when people are going past the childbearing years, when your kids are in high school and there aren't as many little kiddie things around. There's a real grief process that happens, right? You're like, oh, that entire stage of my life is done. My little kids aren't going to be so little anymore. And then they look at the volume of little baby clothes, baby books that they've kept as memories over the years. And it is bins and bins of stuff, because every little outfit and every little pair of socks has meaning. And so I'm not saying that it's necessarily a regret, but eyes are typically open when they look at the amount of baby gear, baby clothes, baby toys, baby electronics that they spent money on over the childhood years. Some of it is worthwhile. Some of it may not be in the end, but I think that's, for my clientele are typically moms, and that's a lot of what I hear. Wow, I didn't realize how much we spent on some of this stuff that they only wore once, but it was so special that I wanted to keep it. But you still spent money on it, and so I hear a lot.
Mm-hmm. I, as a non-mom, I'm very curious your take on this. How much of like all that baby stuff and like childbearing stuff is like function versus keeping up with the Joneses?
Listen, I'll tell you my own experience.
Yeah.
Like 90% of it was keeping up with the Joneses, but also, oh my gosh, if my kid doesn't have this and this and this, they're not going to be as developed by the time kindergarten comes around. And then how are they going to get into the gifted program? And then how are they going to get into college? And the child is 2 years old.
Wow, that was a path you just took me on.
Listen, no. And I was just talking to Andre about it, because he has a preschooler and an infant, and he was already talking about languages. If she's going to be going into a gifted program or in kindergarten, then she needs to learn English now, so that she's on par with all the other kids, because they're non-English speakers at home. And they want their kids to be bilingual, trilingual, whatever. But he was really concerned about it. And I tell you, I was concerned about it too when my kids were 2 and 3. Are they going to get into the right kindergarten? And do they have all this stuff to develop them? So the toys, the puzzles that develop the motor skills, do they have the newest one? Because new research came out that they need to learn how to zip a zipper quickly. All of these things that I spent money on. And now I'm like, really? I could have just given her my jacket to practice zipping up a zipper. But we just don't think about those things. We don't think about the alternatives because we want the best.
Okay, that leads me into the H&R crush, which I'm sure that I've heard this from some of my clients, that some of their kind of overspending on their kids is a reaction to what they feel like they didn't get as a child themselves, or like trying to make up for parenting that they didn't get. The first question around healing your money wounds, the last letter in crush, is what kind of wounds do you see getting opened up and then subsequently healed through the organizing process? And in particular, there are two types of people that I would love to get your thought on. The first one is on like aging parents. And I'm saying this selfishly, as I've had to go through the process of watching my mom and then watching my in-laws like transition homes like later in life. And it was painful. And it still is painful right now to get them to get rid of stuff. So what is your take on why that might be happening? And like, what are some practical steps for a family to go through that process?
Yeah. We know that a lot of this is generational, and it's based on the era that someone grew up in. And like you said, their past experiences. So for our parents in that generation, scarcity was a real thing. It wasn't just, we might not have toilet paper tomorrow. It was like, we need to keep this piece of string because who knows when we're going to find a piece of string when we need it. Things were not as proliferate out there in the marketplace as they are now. And so that tendency continues. My mom keeps every box, plastic bag, Amazon package, every single one, because she, quote unquote, knows that she will use it to repackage something to send as a gift, to send in the mail. And so she has a closet full of this packaging that she's keeping. And I will look at that and say, oh my word, like, why would you keep it? When you need a box, you ask somebody, you ask a neighbor, hey, you have a little box I can borrow? But that's not the mentality that they have. And so we have to understand that. As organizers, we are very conscious of that, and we are very careful about how we approach these things because it does cause a lot of pain. And so when I work with seniors who are going through a transition, I understand that their entire life is changing. It's not just the stuff, but it's also their lifestyle is now changing. Their home is no longer necessarily the giant hub of where all the kids are now going to continue to gather and bring all their stuff and where all the memories live. Now they're switching homes into something new. And so as a child of an aging parent myself, I have to keep in mind that the thing I want my mom to remember is that this new part of her life will create new memories in a new place. They'll be different, yes, but they can be just as unique and as beneficial as the entire part of her life until now, but it will change. And we as kids, we have to be conscious of that. It's difficult. We get frustrated because we're like, oh my gosh, why are you keeping 50 pens? It's a visceral feeling of, I must keep this because it's wasteful for me not to, and I may not find a pen when I need it again.
I can relate to everything that you said. And then the second thing, asking for a friend, is what do you do when you and your spouse have different views on what is useful and what is not, and what you should keep when you're downsizing?
Hypothetically, there's a lot of compromise. My husband keeps every cord, and we laugh about this all the time now. It's frustrating for me and for him because these old electronics and old adapters and old cords, I know.
Oh, we know.
Because I know everything.
Yeah.
Because I know everything.
Yeah.
That he will never use those again. No one will ever need those again. He knows, because he knows everything, that will come in handy one day. And so we've compromised. I call it his black box of doom. It's a big plastic bin, and all the electronic stuff goes into that one box, and it stays in this particular cabinet. And if that box gets full and things start, like, again, we got to think about the limit of the clear process. That's the limit for all this stuff. And if things get full, you've got to go through and make space if you're going to add other stuff to it. So that kind of compromise, it's not easy. It took me all this time to get here. I no longer have strong attachments to things that people might consider sentimental, like greeting cards and art that my kids made when they were little. I don't have a whole lot of sentimental attachment to that. Yeah, I have pictures of everything, and the memories are beautiful when I look at those pictures. Love that. But I don't need it. However, I know other members of my family, they do need that still. And so we just have to work with the limit of the space that we have in our home, or whatever home we're going into next. And that's how we approach the process of decluttering.
I love it. Okay. So I thought it'd be fun just to ask you some like quick rapid fire questions of basically just your kind of like first thought on certain things. And so when it comes to organizing,
I'm nervous.
like stream of consciousness kind of thing.
Okay.
First question would be like those clear containers that everyone like use to make your place super pretty. Worth it or not worth it?
You're that, like the first question right off the bat is, okay, not worth it until you have decluttered. Once you've decluttered and you see what you have, then you decide, do I need a clear bin for this, or can it just sit in the drawer without it? I tell you, I've gone to a house where they've bought all the beautiful bins and spent thousands of dollars on the stuff and put them into drawers or whatever, and one bin holds one pen. You need that? Do you need that, really? So I would say it could be worth it, but declutter first and see what you have, and then shop your home first and shop natural products first.
Got it. Okay, so only worth it if you've already decluttered. If you just start putting trash into it, not worth it. Okay. Yeah. So as someone who is guilty of having the bag of bags, I am totally that person. How many bags, if you are going to keep bags, is the amount of bags that you should have in the bag of bags?
All right. For someone who gets groceries for family, I have come out of a grocery store with 8 bags. So that's what I keep in my trunk. And by the way, it doesn't sit in my house. It stays in my trunk because we drive everywhere. We live in a place. So it doesn't take space in my house. It takes space in my trunk. That said, you can get to that number by seeing what's the biggest load that I need to carry out of Costco any given week. Make that your maximum. And I promise you, if you go into Costco and you're missing a bag, like you will find a bag somewhere. Bags are not scarce.
Yes. Okay.
Everybody's giving out a bag.
Okay. Next quick question is, favorite way to organize shoes? Do you have a favorite type of organizer?
So what you can do to create a tiny bit more space, maybe you can fit one more pair on a shelf, is to do one with heel forward and one with toe forward.
Oh.
And that will take up a tiny bit less space, and it can make all the difference to making your closet carry a few more pairs, which every pair counts. So try that.
I love that. Okay, next question is, how much makeup is too much makeup?
There's never too much makeup. No, I'm not a makeup person, so I say that, but I say that in reality. It's, you know what your morning routine looks like. Too much makeup is when you've set a limit and it goes beyond that. And you can choose, though, what that limit is. If every drawer in your bathroom and every cabinet in your bathroom is your makeup, and your husband's stuff, sorry, babe, it's got to live in the guest bathroom. Can't live here. Mm-hmm. All of this is my makeup space. You're making that choice that's the amount of makeup I'm going to keep. Maximum. We fill our space based on the amount of space that we have.
That's true. That's true. And then last question, are any tips for the pantry on best storing your snacks as someone who snacks a lot?
A lot of people like to decant into clear containers so they see how much they have. If that makes sense for you, that's fine. The only thing to remember is that takes maintenance. So you do it once, you've got to continue doing it every time you go to the grocery store or every time you get low on that snack. So is it worth it to you to decant? That's the first question. And not, you can have those snacks you put all the boxes and bags of snacks into a beautiful basket. So visually, you're not seeing the jumbled mess. Everything is contained and in order, but you don't have to decant every single package of everything. Sometimes my kids will have one type of Oreos. Sometimes they want 3 types of Oreos. If I had a separate container for each type of Oreo, like we would have 50 containers for every type of snack that we have in our house, because we don't buy the exact same thing every week.
That's right.
So the amount of time that you want to spend maintaining is going to determine how much of that decanting you want to do. But an easy way to make your pantry look nice is to contain stuff into uniform containers, whether those are baskets or baskets or boxes that you can put all your containers into so that they stay in order. It's visually clean, but you don't have to decant every single little thing.
I love it.
So that's a tip.
Yay. Good job. See? It wasn't too bad, right?
It was good.
So I've had so much fun with this. If people want to learn more about you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm at Firefly Bridge Organizing, or my website is fireflybridge.com. And yeah, send me a little note, a little voice memo. I don't mind.
Awesome. So we'll put those in the links below. And
Excellent.
if you liked this episode, we would love for you to subscribe to the channel, comment on which tip most resonated with you, and let us know what other topics you're interested in when it relates to crushing your money goals. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Bye, everybody.